this is Jennifer Vanderbeek, Imagine Artist in Residence, and today I have a project inspired by the challenge prompt motion. So I'm going to start this 3D paper sculpture of mine by stamping some very detailed images in VersaFine ink. And then I've got my focal images, and I also need a border of sorts. So I'm going to stamp this fern image first in Memento Looks in Pistachio, and then I'm going to use that same VersaFine ink, I believe it's Olympia Green, and I'm going to stamp over it to kind of create some layers, and then I'm going to give the whole thing a spray with some New Sprout fireworks spray and help set it with my heat gun a little bit, but then I'm going to set it aside while I work on coloring my images with Memento markers. I tend to stamp a lot of images when I'm going to do some coloring or painting on them just because I want backups. I like to be able to experiment with the color combinations or shading techniques. For the hummingbirds, for instance, I did 3. I did kind of a more traditional red-throated hummingbird that I used some photo reference on. I also did a couple other was a little bit more monochromatic or fantasy colored. And then for the flowers, I just really enjoyed playing around with the different colors of greens and pinks to get the shades that I really wanted the best. Once that was all colored and cut out, and I cut out my border strips as well, I'm going to start on the bulk of the sculpture itself. I've got a couple of empty spools of ribbon and an old thread spool that I just had lying around, and these are going to kind of form the internal structure of my sculpture. And then to cover it all, I'm using these strips of double-sided paper. The cardstock has a light green and a dark green that coordinate pretty well with the ink colors I've chosen. And I've cut 1/2-inch strips, and I am applying each of them to the top spool of ribbon with tear-it tapes, little pieces of tear-it tape. The reason being that once they're all folded down, they're going to completely enclose the portion underneath the spool. So it's kind of like, think about like a weeping willow or curtain of foliage in a rainforest. That was the whole idea here, that we were going to create this backdrop so that then the cutouts would kind of interact with this background that I'm creating. So you saw where I used the swizzle stick as my height, and I used a piece of cardstock wrapped around underneath where it came out from the ribbon spool to keep it from slipping down. And then I put another little scrap piece of cardstock on the bottom of the second ribbon spool to act as a stop so that, if you pick up the whole thing, it doesn't kind of try and collapse on you. My strips were a little bit longer than I needed, which was intentional. I kind of wanted to be able to trim them to fit as opposed to have to try and do the math to figure it out first. So once I got them trimmed off, and then it was time to put the border around the base of my sculpture, then I used some of those cast off pieces to create supports or little brackets for the fern stamping border to fit around. I'm also covering the top with some semicircles of cardstock just to cover up the edges. You could also do the same on the bottom. I opted not to. And then I'm going to use more of the tear-it tape to position my fussy cut images around the entire perimeter of my sculpture. Now, what I was realizing as I was working with the little slats is that this would work really well to create a hot air balloon if you just left them longer and let them blouse out a little bit. It would also work really well for a carousel theme. And here you can see the whole thing. It kind of rotates around, and you could suspend this from the ceiling. You could put it on a base like I did there and have it as a rotating centerpiece, or you could just put it somewhere where it'll be seen from all sides and there won't be a bat or a front or back or anything. So I hope you've enjoyed this project. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, for more tips and inspiration, please point your browsers to imaginecrafts.com.